Wadi al-Jinn was cursed land. The Bedouins who once roamed the desert knew better than to venture into that forsaken valley. They spoke of spirits older than the earth itself, beings of smokeless fire who twisted men's minds and fed on their terror. The Jinn were not to be disturbed. Yet Rasha, a geologist raised on the outskirts of the village, had dismissed those tales as mere superstition. Her team, a small but experienced group, had been in dangerous landscapes before. They had mapped deserts, climbed mountains, and even ventured into caves believed haunted. Wadi al-Jinn was just another remote site in the vast Arabian wilderness to explore and map, or so she believed. The valley was unnaturally quiet from the moment they arrived. The air pressed down on them like a physical weight, suffocating and dense. No birds circled the sky, and even the wind seemed to avoid this place. The cliffs surrounding them cast long, jagged shadows that seemed to shift with the fading light, warping in ways that made no sense. Although Rasha didn't admit it, the silence was unsettling, like the land itself was holding its breath. As night fell, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. Rasha and her team set up camp near a dry riverbed, where jagged rocks jutted from the sand like broken teeth. The campfire flickered weakly, as if it struggled to survive in this place. Then came the whispers. At first, they were just faint echoes, like the desert wind brushing past her ears. Rasha ignored them, chalking it up to the way sound carried through the canyon walls. But the whispers grew more insistent, taking on the cadence of language she couldn't quite understand, though each word scratched at the back of her mind with haunting familiarity. Words, half-formed, unintelligible, yet filled with something like malice, seemed to crawl into her mind uninvited. "Did you hear that?" one of her colleagues asked, his voice a barely concealed tremor. Rasha nodded, keeping her tone steady.
It's just the wind.
But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The air was completely still. Hours passed, and the voices grew louder. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was an invasion. Rasha couldn't place where the whispers came from. They seemed to echo from all directions, wrapping around their camp like invisible fingers. The others huddled close to the fire, the one source of warmth and light that felt real. But even the flames seemed weaker, as if the valley itself was feeding off its life. By midnight, the whispers became unbearable. They weren't just sounds, they were inside her head, prying at her memories and burrowing into her thoughts like parasites. Faces she hadn't thought of in years flashed before her eyes. Her family, long-dead ancestors, even strangers she'd passed once and never thought of again. They twisted into grotesque, taunting faces, and their words blended into a single cacophony that sent chills down her spine. Then, without warning, Saeed, one of her team members, stood up and began walking away from the campfire.
Saeed, where are you going?
He didn't respond. His movements were stiff, mechanical, as though his legs moved against his will, guided by some unseen force. The rest of the team watched in silence, too terrified to move. Rasha grabbed her flashlight and ran after him, her heart pounding. The beam of her light flickered wildly, as if something in the air was interfering with it. She called out again, her voice breaking, but the only answer was the growing chorus of whispers, now clearer, sharper. The words were ancient, foreign, but somehow she understood their meaning. They were calling her deeper into the valley, inviting her to a place where light could not reach. Saeed stopped suddenly, his back to her. His body trembled, and for a moment, Rasha thought he might collapse. But when he turned to face her, the sight stopped her breath in her throat. His eyes were wrong. They were black, soulless pits, emptier than death itself. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, as if whatever was inside him had hollowed him out completely.
We were warned. We should have stayed away.
Saeed whispered, though his voice wasn't his anymore. It was deeper, layered as if something else was speaking through him. Rasha took a step back, her pulse racing. She wanted to scream, but fear choked the sound before it could escape. The ground beneath her feet pulsed, alive with whispers, as if they'd taken root beneath her skin. The valley itself began to change. What had once been open desert was now a twisted, endless labyrinth of jagged cliffs and black sand. The world was folding in on itself, twisting to trap her. She felt them there, watching, something lurking just outside the edges of her flashlight's reach. She couldn't see them, not exactly, but she felt the weight of their presence, like pairs of unseen eyes burrowing into her skin, filling her with an irrational sense of dread. One Jinn stepped forward, or perhaps it simply made itself felt in her mind, its voice a grinding resonance that shook her bones.
You came seeking understanding, yet you have found only your doom.
Rasha stumbled backward, her heart hammering in her chest. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but the valley itself seemed alive, shifting underfoot, turning the earth against her. The cliffs twisted and buckled, looming as if to close around her. There was no escape. The Jinn encircled her now, their whispers merging into a deafening roar. Her thoughts weren't her own anymore. They were invaded, manipulated, twisted against her. The faces of her loved ones morphed into grotesque, mocking masks, jeering at her, laughing. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she fell to her knees, crushed by the weight of the Jinn's presence, each moment filling her with despair.
You are nothing but dust beneath our feet. You belong to us now, as your kind always has.
The Jinn hissed, their voices merging into one monstrous entity. Saeed's hollow face appeared before her, grinning with a twisted smile that held no warmth, no life. His body convulsed, his limbs bending in ways no human body should. His jaw unhinged, stretching impossibly wide as his mouth filled with darkness. He was no longer Saeed. He was their puppet, a soulless vessel, used and discarded. Rasha felt the ground beneath her begin to shift again, the sand swallowing her legs as the Jinn closed in. Her body felt cold, the warmth stolen from her by the valley itself, now alive with a power ancient and vindictive. She was a trespasser here, a soul meant to pay for the sins of her intrusion. As the sand pulled her under, she glimpsed the eyes of the Jinn watching, or perhaps simply felt them. Eyes that burned with an unseen but overwhelming force, waiting for her final breath to release her soul into their clutches. She fought, clawing at the sand, screaming into the endless night, but the whispers only grew louder, drowning her out, until her voice was nothing but a faint echo swallowed by Wadi al-Jinn, where all intruders became prisoners, their souls bound to the cursed land forever.